but it was wrong. When someone came back and somehow fought free of their shroud and clawed up through all that dirt, the scene was a mess. The surface would be chopped up, dirt thrown everywhere, long scratch marks to show where the cold fingers had pulled the body out of the grave. Gutsy had seen that many times. This was not like that. The dirt was heaped in 2 piles on either side of the hole. Neat piles. As Gutsy crept close, eyes flicking left and right across the cemetery, she knew that her mother had not done this. She stopped by the edge of the grave, at the end where she had laid her mother's head down, and saw smooth patches on the sides of the hole. Shovel marks. Someone had dug her mother up. The soiled white shroud lay across one hump of dirt, and it had clearly been sliced open by a sharp knife. The rope Gutsy had tied around her mother's ankles, knees, wrists, and arms lay like severed snakes, their ends showing clean cuts. Gutsy hefted her machete, the heavy blade offering only cold comfort. It would protect her, as it had many times, but not against everything. Not against a swarm of the dead. Not against a gang of the living. Not against a gun. She turned in a slow circle, eyes narrowed as she looked at everything, accepting nothing at face value, making no foolish assumptions. Ready. Inside her chest, Gutsy's heart felt like it had already been attacked and gravely wounded. She'd barely begun to grieve for her mother, had not even taken the first steps forward as an orphan when her mama had shown up in the yard last night. That had been bad. So bad. If she thought Wednesday night had been the worst thing she had ever experienced or ever felt, she was wrong. Thursday night was so much worse. So much. And now Friday morning was spinning out of control. A pretty morning here in South Texas had become a storm of ugliness, and it was only going to get worse. She had no doubt at all about that. So much worse. Someone had dug her mother up, had freed her from the shroud and ropes, and either set her on the road back to town or brought her there. The former possibility was thin because there were gates and guards, but strange things happen sometimes. The dead, though mostly unable to think, occasionally found ways back into town. That was why so many people thought there was something unnatural going on. Demons, maybe. Or ghosts. Gutsy didn't believe in those kinds of monsters. Never had. Last night, though, she had come dangerously close to believing in the supernatural. She'd convinced herself that Mama had somehow found her way back home. That, despite being dead, Mama had known where her home was. Gutsy knew it was wishful thinking, but she'd clung to it for as long as she could. Now, in the harsh light of day, the second possibility seemed far more likely, that someone alive had done this. Normally, having solid common-sense ground to stand on would have been a comfort. It would have calmed her. Not now. No way. Who would do such a thing? Why would anyone do this? A hot breeze blew through the cemetery, picking up dust and pieces of dried weeds. It blew past her, rasping across her face and then moving on, howling its way into the broken lands beyond the wall. Gordo whinnied again. Nothing else moved. There was no one else there. It took a long time for Gutsy to accept and believe that, but after 5 long minutes she lowered her machete. The blade fell from her hand, landing with a dull thud. She squatted down beside the empty grave, wrapped her arms around her head, and began to cry. Some of the tears were bitter. Some were as hot as the rage that burned in her chest. The world was full of monsters. Gutsy knew that as well as anyone left alive. Not all those monsters were the living dead. That made it all so much worse. Chapter 3. The memories came to her like a swarm of monsters, grabbing at her, holding her down, biting her, making her bleed, making